From silent screen origins to an articulated Orlok, here's your look at the NECA Nosferatu, a symphony of horror ultimate action figure. The 1922 vampire film Nosferatu is considered an influential masterpiece of the silent era, and over 100 years later it still holds a place in the imaginations of horror fans everywhere. NECA's ultimate Count Orlok action figure presents an eerie count in a sensational style, with details and accessories carefully sourced from the film. Well, you may not be able to find him during the day, but it doesn't mean that the granddaddy of the vampires didn't deserve a better figure. And the one that we get here from NECA Toys, I think, does do things right. Before, of course, we get a closer look at Count Orlok, or Nosferatu, the tape measure tells us that he's a tall figure, but by how much? 7.5 inches in height, or the figure's about 19.5 centimeters tall. We seem to be getting a lot of Nosferatu figures and collectibles as of late. Recently, in fact, we did have a look at a Super 7 release of Nosferatu. I know, obviously, looking at the two, NECA blows it out of the water. NECA just does things a lot better when it comes to not only the body, the proportions of the figure. He needs to be tall and lanky. And NECA, I think, delivers a much better looking Nosferatu when you compare the two. Speaking of also comparisons, I did also want to bring in at least another vampire that NECA Toys has done. Here's what the figure looks like with the black and white version of Bela Lugosi's Dracula. Uh-oh, sun's coming out. Better rush this along. To come include with Count Orlok, first the figure comes included with this parchment paper. Well, there unfortunately isn't a place to really store the paper. I wish they could have maybe down the road released a Nosferatu accessory set. I don't know if the demand would be as high as maybe some of the other Universal monster figure accessory sets that we've gotten, but just something at least like a tabletop. We could take the provided paper and just have it resting on there along with the quill pen, the little well, and all the other accessories that we're about to have a look at. As it is for paper, it's been nicely printed on both sides. That side, and of course we flip it around, you can see it on the other side as well. But being only just by paper, the condition and longevity of this will be based on really how careful you are when it comes to these accessories. Likely until I find a place to put this other than just in his hand. I might just put this back in the packaging just because I don't want this to get damaged. The figure also comes included with his bottle. Not dropping anything else in the process. The bottle's been molded nicely here in a very shiny black plastic. You can't really see inside, you can't really see if there's any liquid left, but the fact that the end of the bottle looks like it's missing a cork, likely whatever was inside the bottle is no longer inside the bottle. And of course he does also have a couple of gripping hands. We'll kind of look at the hands more in a moment, but he has a couple of hands that you can have holding the bottle. Maybe not that necessarily that hand, but let's grab like this hand, for example. You just take the end of the bottle and basically wedge it in between his fingers until his hand holds onto it. You can have the figure displayed that way if you want. The figure also comes included with an ink well and a quill pen. The ink well itself has been molded here in black plastic. If I actually flip this around, you can see there on the top, there's a hole. You can take then the provided quill pen and just take the point and just very carefully fit inside the hole. You really don't even have to fit it that hard either. I mean, it holds perfectly fine. You can see it holds its weight perfectly. The thing about it, though, is because the quill pen only has a little thin bit of plastic, don't put too much pressure against this in case it happens to buckle and snap the plastic. The actual quill has been nicely painted, just very lightly brushing on there a lighter gray on both the sides of the quill pen. And you can either have it just kept in the actual well, but the thing about it, again, I don't have a desk or any place to display this. You can at least, though, take one of the provided hands, as he does have a hand really suited for holding the quill pen. Instead of having it just down like this, if you take the thumb in between the thumb and the pointer, you can take the quill pen and sort of just run it parallel to those. So it actually looks like he's holding and writing something onto the paper itself. Unfortunately, again, like without not having anything really to store any one of these accessories, your choices are either just to keep them in his hands or just to merely put it back in the packaging. But at least he has proper hands for holding all those accessories. The figure also comes included with his keys. I'm going to do my best not just to compare back and forth between what Super 7 did with their Nosferatu and what we're getting here from NECA Toys. I mean, NECA, honestly, for me at least, always is the go-to when it comes to horror figures. Super 7's was fine if you wanted kind of more of a cartoon-looking Nosferatu. But I think, especially for the accessories, and you'll see in a second with Nosferatu himself, NECA just did it a lot better. The keys, speaking of doing things better, The keys themselves actually look like they're all different from one another. Super 7s sort of all just had their keys looking the same. And unfortunately, though, while the keys do get a little hung up there in the actual chain, they at least could be said that they have an actual chain. Just really nice looking keys. Now, the figure also comes with some swappable hands. He has what I could best describe as the closest thing to relaxed hands on the ends of his forearms, but he also comes with a couple of gripping hands as well. Now, we've already looked at one hand that's there for holding the quill pen. He also has another hand for, you could say, for holding the bottle, for example. But then he has one other hand that seems to only have a slit on the end of it. If you look at the top of it, there may be an entry, but there's no exit. On the bottom of it, it's completely molded shut. I'm not quite sure specifically what this is for. It isn't necessarily for the quill pen. I mean, you could put the quill on the end of it, but that's not really going to be holding it well at all. You could take, for example, the paper. But the paper, again, you're only going to be able to take the corner and fit it in there. So the only other thing I thought it could be there for is actually taking any one of the keys. If you take the keys with the smallest ring, the keys kind of fit inside the little slot here. And you can carry around the keys that way. The only thing about it, though, is I just don't want to put too much pressure against this because this is very thin plastic. And the likelihood of that breaking is very high. Other than that, I can't think of any other thing that this is specifically for, as it looks like, again, it's only open from the top. It's not open from the bottom. Speaking of hands, though, the figure does have the closest thing I could describe as relaxed hands on the ends of his forearms, but then he also comes included with another hand that's just, well, it's this hand here, which I thought for a second was there for also holding the bottle, but the bottle isn't as wide enough to be supported in the hand, so you can basically just get another gripping hand. The figure also comes included with hands with much longer fingers, so if you want to have them a little more closer to looking like Nosferatu and less like Orlok, you can have the hands with much longer fingers. If you compare the two, not that these hands are acceptable in society, but like they have much shorter fingernails than the ones that we get here. Really nice looking hands. Nice paint on these too. I like the way they've actually put the little more of a purple color on the ends of the fingers, and then as we get closer to like the sleeves, it's a much paler complexion. Very nice hands. Then the figure also comes included with a hat. Now, he's not technically having the head right now that comes with the figure when you get him out of the packaging. I did move things, a few of the things around. I think he may have actually come included with this head sculpt as the stock head. But if you did want to have the figure displayed as Count Orlok, first of all, he does come with a slightly softer plastic hat. You could, in theory, put it on any one of the heads. Unfortunately, though, if you want to have the figure displayed as Nosferatu with, you can see like his ears stick out a little bit further on Nosferatu's. It's a little harder to put the hat on top of there just because the ears stick out. So, if you didn't want to display more like the Count, this head sculpt, as you can see, has the ears more tucked in, and it better suits, I feel, to hold the hat, even to the point where you can actually tilt the figure upside down, and the hat's not going to go anywhere. I'm probably not going to be displaying the figure as Count Orlok, but I do appreciate the fact that the head sculpt's as good as it is. Now, again, to bring back in the one we got from Super 7, just to show you guys comparison's sake, I mean, obviously, there's a place in collectors' shelf space when it comes to the Super 7 release, but honestly, though, looking at the two, doesn't NECA just do it a lot better? The one thing also about this one that we got from Super 7 was the fact it didn't have a removable hat. So at least NECA's beating in that department, at least by the fact it does have a removable hat. He does also have a removable head sculpt, obviously, by looking at the fact he already comes with two other heads. He comes with this one with the eyes slightly shifting off to the side. You can see as well, he's not hiding as much the fact he's a vampire by the fact that the ears are sticking out, where, again, the ears for the Count are actually a little bit more closer to his head sculpt. Now, for me, at least, I don't know if, again, I would ever see myself displaying him as the Count, other than maybe if I just happen to pick up another figure of this guy, which could very likely happen. To change out the head sculpts, it's just a case of popping the head off, putting the new head on top of the ball joint. And then he also has this head sculpt, which honestly, between the three, might be my favorite. I don't know why I ended up deciding to put this one onto the neck, but I do kind of like the way that the eye is off to the side like this, whereas these eyes are actually looking straight forward. The ears, though, still stick out. You can see, again, like the front fangs of this version of Vampire, and some really nice use of coloring there on the sides of his face. Generally, though, the complexion of his skin is quite pale, but by adding just a little bit of purple that they've added to the sides, and not to mention around the areas of the eyes, it still manages to really have a head sculpt that pops on this figure. And again, just changing out the heads is just a case of popping that off, popping the new head back in place. I mean, notably, his head's going to sit a little further down. I mean, the shoulders are such close quarters to the rest of his head, but that's the way he looks like in the movie. Proportionately, again, like while he may not look like a human figure, a regular, normal human figure, I mean, again, like you look at the two between what we got from Super 7. Again, I don't want to keep comparing it to Super 7, but again, from Super 7's part to what we got from NECA, just between the two figures, NECA's just a much better looking Nosferatu. For the rest of his body, this now here is all soft plastic. You can see, like, basically, as I'm squeezing this whole back section caves in. So I don't know if they're actually using a standard body underneath that they probably have used before. But I mean, clearly is the case that they also sculpted a brand new shirt underneath that. And then basically just the jacket itself is a softer plastic overlay over top of it. The sleeves do pretty good of a job of matching to the front of the jacket, even though this is harder plastic, this is softer plastic. And again, he has the more somewhat human hands that doesn't have the longer fingernails. But again, if you want to just change those out, just you wiggle these back and forth. Careful doing this, by the way, that if there's resistance, you want to maybe heat these up in hot water. Not that I've had any problems with pegs breaking off for the wrists, but it's very possible. Just taking one of the hands that have the longer fingernails, we're just going to pop it back onto the end of the forearm. There we go. And now, again, you can see the difference between the two. See how he has just slightly shorter nails on one side, much longer nails on the other. More, this is the route I'm going to be going when it comes to displaying this guy on the shelf. Legs are very lean, very thin on this figure as well, and he's got very large feet. Though he has larger feet, luckily at least he does have peg holes in the undersides of them, because I did notice, though, with my Nosferatu, and it probably is the case across the board, he has a harder time, it seems, to stand, even though he has really large feet. I don't know if it may have something to do with the fact that his feet aren't completely flat. I noticed on mine, obviously I'm sure I'm noticing on everybody else's as well, that the feet almost sit not completely flush. Even if you have the feet like angled a little further up, I couldn't help but notice like the feet don't seem completely flat on the bottom. Again, you can always use the provided peg holes, even though the figures don't come included with display stands. I just use another display stand attaching onto the bottom of the figure's feet. Now for Nosferatu's articulation, going back, though, to his head sculpt, it's going to be on a ball joint. So once again, it does rotate all the way around. Because his collar sits as high as it does, means that you really can't quite rotate his head normally like this. You kind of have to rotate it more on an angle. It does, though, still rotate all the way around, but it's just going to get a little more hung up. The head moves up and down, back and forth. It seems as well that the figure may have also a secondary ball joint, which just happened to be the case. I popped the head off. He has a secondary ball joint just underneath the collar of the shirt, so you can actually move the neck around independently as well. Popping that back in place. The figure does also have an upper torso ball joint, although it's kind of really hard to see what's going on behind the scenes. The arms come out at 90 degrees. You can take those arms and rotate them all the way around, although they're really tight when you're doing this. The figure has only just a single hinge in his elbow, but at least the forearm can rotate back and forth. Hands do rotate also all the way around and hinge those back and forth. And then for the legs do split. Now, you can't split them very far, obviously, just because he's got so much jacket that goes so far down. At least they did put a split on the back of the jacket, so it sort of helps to aid a little bit with the figure's mobility, at least down below here. The legs move forward only by just a little bit back is there as well. Single hinge only in the knee. The lower leg rotates back and forth, and then for the ankle, back and forth this way, and rocking back and forth this way as well. I think we are getting a black and white release of Nosferatu, if he hasn't already been released. Definitely would like to get my hands on that one, because I think in the territory of where I want to have these guys displayed, I'm going to bring back in the black and white Dracula. I would much rather, I think, have Nosferatu in the territory of black and white rather than color. Now, obviously, when he first debuted in the silver screen, as hard and distorted as that old picture may have been, he was presented in black and white. So I do hope that at some point I get my hands on the black and white release of Nosferatu, if one has already been released, as I definitely will be displaying him more so in the black and white Universal monsters we've gotten so far from NECA, rather than the color ones. Still like the fact that we did get a colorized version of this guy, colored at least in the sense that his jacket is kind of more of a brown. I think if we do get ourselves an off-colored or a black and white release of this guy, that we probably are going to have the colors of him a little bit more darker and black than what we're getting right now. Slithering his way up the stairwell and getting his steps in for the day, we've got Nosferatu here in final looks in that iconic pose. The thing I like that NECA's done right, that maybe Super 7 missed the mark on when it came to their release of the vampire, is giving him the proper size he deserved. Nosferatu should be taller than other Universal monsters. He should be also a lot leaner, too. And unfortunately, though, while not necessarily slacking on Super 7, Super 7 does fine when it comes to their Ultimate release figures, but we all know the company we go to when it comes to Universal Monsters, or just monster figures in general. NECA keeps continuing to knock it out of the park with all the stuff they're doing from the Universal Monsters, and they're not stopping anytime soon with what we got here from Nosferatu. Now, I did look, though, online, and I wanted to see the differences between this one and the black and white. There is, in fact, a black and white release of Nosferatu. The colors are pretty close. If anything could be said, the jacket is a little bit different in color. The jacket resembles a little more of a darker gray, whereas the one we get here for the colorized version, and again, putting it in quotation marks, because if you don't get the chance to get the black and white, I think it could still be a serviceable stand-in for a black and white release of Nosferatu. Just the fact that the colors of his jacket are a little bit more brownish rather than what we're getting with the black and white. Still, I might see myself picking up the black and white. I say see myself. Obviously, I'm going to be picking up the black and white version of Nosferatu. When I do, though, I'll bring in this guy back in, and you guys can see the differences between the two. When I do eventually pick up the black and white release of Nosferatu, I think what I might end up doing is displaying this one as Count Orlok and displaying the black and white as Nosferatu. Have you guys had the chance to pick up this figure? Let me know down below in the comment section. And if you have picked him up, do you have him displayed as Nosferatu the Vampire, or do you have him displayed as Dear Count Orlok? Let me know. If you guys did, in the meantime, enjoy this video, I want to throw it a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and you'd like to stick around for more, we are also going to be looking at some more NECA reviews. I mean, that kind of goes with the territory, I suppose. This seems to be the go-to channel when it comes to NECA reviews. Definitely more, though, will be coming your way. But in the meantime, though, if you want to feed your thirst for NECA reviews, popping up at the very end of this video as well would be a playlist not only covering the territory of Universal Monsters, but covering across the entire landscape of everything I've done from NECA in the past, the present. I would say in the future, but future hasn't yet happened. So, of course, it's only going to be in the present time. But all the things that will be showing up for NECA reviews will be popping in those playlists. So feel free, again, if you have a little bit of time in your hands, check them out. They'll be popping up, not quite yet, in probably a couple of moments. They'll be popping up at the very end of this video. Also, as always, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.